Hi, Rhonda. Hi, Naeem. Hi, Vinta. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This event is part of Reflect, a program series from re.riddle that offers in-depth access into the creative process and practice of our artists. For the month of September, we are spotlighting Nyame Brown in his solo exhibition, The Future Lore of Blackness, at 1632 Market Street in San Francisco. Accompanying the exhibition is programming that expands upon the themes and questions explored in the show. Today, we're thrilled to be speaking with artists Nyame Brown and Binta Ayofemi and Rhonda Pagnozzi, curator of Mothership, Voyage into Futurism at the Oakland Museum of California. And today we're going to talk about the themes of world building and Afrofuturism. So let's learn a little bit about the artists. Marion Brown is an Afrofuturist installation artist working in multimedia, Blackboard's augmented reality, gaming, and fashion. His work addresses the Black imagination as a space for new ways to perceive the diaspora as transatlantic, psychic, and imagined, not just through unity and similarity, but by looking at the dynamics of difference. Brown received his BFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago and MFA from Yale School of Art and Architecture. He has been the recipient of the Joan Mitchell Painters and Sculptures Award and the Richard Dreyhouse Foundation Individual Artist Award. He participated in the Theaster Gates Black Artists Retreat in Chicago and in Carrie Mae Weems' Symposium, The Interrogation of Forms, Changing Culture in America, at the Armory in New York, and had residencies here locally at the Headland Center of Arts, Bemis Center for Contemporary Art, and the Joan Mitchell Center in New Orleans. Brown has had solo exhibitions at the Museum of African Diaspora, MOAD, Museum of Harlem, Hearst Museum at St. Mary's College, and West Virginia University Art Museum. Brown was selected as the 2020 Tulsa Studio Award recipient and awarded a studio at Minnesota Street Project through 2021. His work is featured in the group exhibition, Mothership Voyage into Afrofuturism at the Oakland Museum of California, currently on view through February 2022. Next, I'd like to introduce Binta Ayofemi. Binta Ayofemi creates new urban forms, shaping spatial practice and sound, performance and paintings, landscapes and architecture from a palette of urban materials. Ayofemi shifts accepted narratives around urban voids, seemingly abandoned structures, and economic displacement, while limiting notions of fugitivity, freedom, duration, and Black radical imagination. Her work explores material movement, making, manufacturing, and authorship of public and private space. Ayofemi's work has been featured by Untitled, the Caddis Foundation, SF MoMA, the Carpenter Center, Wattis Institute Asian Art Museum, the New Museum at Documenta, the British Arts Council, Rebuild Foundation, AIA, and City of Oakland as an artist painter of Black Cultural Zone and at the Oakland Museum. Ayofemi's upcoming exhibitions, Black Space and Black Monuments, open in 2021. Last but not least, we're happy to have Rhonda Pagnozzi. She's currently the Public Programs Manager at the Oakland Museum of California. After earning 2 undergraduate degrees in developmental psychology and the arts, Pagnozzi worked for 10 years in the field of early childhood education and community engagement. In 2014, she earned a master's degree in urban studies with an emphasis on contemporary art from the San Francisco Art Institute. Her graduate research focused on the social-political beliefs of art in the urban setting and tackled the broader issues of access and privilege. Before taking her role at the Oakland Museum of California, Pagnozzi worked as the Civic Engagement Coordinator at YBCA. Pagnozzi's most recent projects include Assistant Curator, Queer California Untold Stories, and Lead Curator of Mothership Voyage into Afrofuturism, again, which opens until February 2022. So thank you, all of you, for joining. I'd like to start off our discussion today with a question, a general question for all of you. Let's explore the concept of Black world building. How do you integrate the concept into your work? For Rhonda, it could be with your project at the Oakland Art Museum, and for Binta with your urban development, and Nyame within your work. So I'm going to let you guys take it from here. Thank you.
So, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and just talk a little bit about the show. Thank you so much for having me here and engage in this conversation with these two amazing artists. I feel so honored to be here. And And yeah, for me, as a non-Black curator, it was really critical for me to center the voices of the artists and the collaborators on the project. And, we started working on this project in 2019 and, spent about 8 months identifying Black artists, Black community members, different Black curators, and had these sort of culmination of conversations that shaped the ultimate direction of the show. And, I just kind of looked at myself as like a facilitator who was just sort of, getting out of the way and trying to find places where we could connect these threads. And Black world buildings quickly surfaced as one of the themes of the project. And, there are a lot of different ways to think about Afrofuturism, but for this project, we thought about it primarily as a theory of knowledge that draws from the African diaspora. And just one way that I'll touch on how it addresses Black world building, because there's so many ways, and I know Binta and Name will go into this, but for me, a really exciting piece was the manipulation of time. And, Afrofuturism often will collapse time into the past, present, and future to create sort of a singular experience. And in this way, recontextualizing often historical moments or, recontextualizing time in a way that reclaims Black narratives and creates bold territories that already exist, but just thinks about them from this collapsed time experience. And in that way, to me, it is like a method for Black community building and Black space making. And a lot of the central features, the central figures in Afrofuturism do this. Octavia Butler does it in her writing, and Parliament Funkadelic does it in his music. And there's like a sonic freedom in the way that he thinks about or thought about in his bands P-Funk, Parliament and Funkadelic, world building through African iconography and collapsing time and traveling to outer space. And, Sun Ra literally was talking about taking Black people from Earth and creating a new world on another planet. So, and also one last thing I'll emphasize is just the show, we really wanted to highlight the mundane for thinking about Black space making in its literal sense. And because a lot of Afrofuturism is about fantasy and bombast, and for a lot of what we were trying to get at, Essence and I, who's the consulting curator who couldn't be here today, who the show would not be what it is without her. So I want to make sure to highlight Essence's contributions to the project. But we wanted to emphasize how while a lot of Afrofuturism is fantastical and otherworldly, as a counterpoint, the mundane rejoices in the pleasures of the everyday and draws from the experiences and stories where Black people just love and create and live and rejoice and uphold each other, and how that is about Black world building in its most literal sense. Basically, why do Black people have to be superhuman to experience a safe and just human existence? So I'll pass it off to Name and Binta, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
The way that the world building kind of functions, like in my practice, and kind of how I start approaches, is it's almost like we're talking about this like in a conference one time, but it's like almost Sankofa time. It's like, again, like kind of bending back. And so you kind of touched on it a bit, Rhonda, that idea of looking at what are like earlier kind of intonations of Black kind of culture or the diaspora culture, and what are the contemporary kind of like intonations of that, and making that speculative leap by trying to almost connect the two, because seeing that like there is a core kind of traditional root, and we keep building on that. I think a lot about the Black masking Indians, New Orleans, in terms of like, the early costumes they had are far cry from where they look now. Like one guy described them like the early outfits look like Cadillacs and the new ones look like spaceships, right? Because it's still encompassing this idea of African ornamentation as well as kind of Native American, and honoring an homage to Native American culture and the way that they kind of helped free slaves, again, to stay like free. But the way that they look, it's like they keep, each generation adds a new kind of reinterpretation of it. And again, it's like, and part of like, I think the Black aesthetic is, again, you hold on to kind of the core, right? The kind of traditional kind of ideas, but you have to keep bringing it forward, right? Or even kind of speculate, right? Like what that next intonation of it might be. And so I think that that's, again, like how I kind of think a lot about, like when I move around in East Oakland, you're looking at like some of the amazing like whips and cars that people have, thinking of like the neon kind of underneath it, and thinking that becomes then a jumping off point for me to kind of speculate what that might be. And thinking of how we, like, if we're seeing ourselves in the future, it's still under our own kind of terms. So it's like fly clothes, body comportment in terms of how, what we think is cool, how we move, those things are still gonna be there in the future. They're gonna dress slightly different, but they're still gonna be dope. You know, the cars are gonna be UFOs, they're still gonna have the neon, you're still gonna have like the candy paint on them. But looking at the past and then what the current culture looks like as it plays, as it looks cool, as it looks, you know, as it's kind of intellectualizing about something, making that, using that again as that springboard to kind of make the leap of like what that looks like kind of in the future, like how we move, how we dress. And it's also creates a space where I could create all kinds of scenarios. You know, it's an open space where I could start to move ideas around, okay, about what that Blackness might be, and then what are the scenes of the future. You know, again, it's like it kind of creates that open space. So again, really looking back, that idea of Sankofa time, like looking back and then at the present to kind of, again, create that speculative leap of where the culture might be, you know.
I love what you're saying about open space, and I'm really seeing a continuum. And I think that, you know, when we get into a circle and dance together or sing together, pulling from those, you know, African-American, Native American, diasporic influences, there is this sense of like a collapse of the current moment and opening into that portal. And whether you're like with P-Funk or Sun Ra, or you're doing like, I've been working with choreography in my art practice in a lot of the vacant lots and kind of vacant areas, whether it's East Oakland or the edge of the city here in San Francisco, and just looking at the way that this kind of world building or this portal or this continuum happens often in a circle. And so that's why your show is incredible, because it really has that sense of possibility, a little bit of the iridescence, the sense of, you know, like in the New Orleans costuming, those costumes are performance of all the different times and this hybridity, right? Yeah. And I feel like that is something you can see performed right off of Market Street here. If you go, you know, just to the edge where people are kind of communicating, and West Oakland on the platform at the bar, you know. So I'm very excited at the fact that, you know, and Rhonda, I want to acknowledge your incredible work as a pollinator. It's so, because of this constant world building and this collapse of time, past, present, and future, it was so powerful to have the Oakland Museum, you know, even before the acknowledgement of Black Lives Matter movement on the scale that it actually rose to in, you know, our recent past, and how to have Oakland Museum through your practice actually really acknowledge this incredible utopian practice that happens in Afrofuturism, the world building itself, but also the fact that the superhumanness of just trying to override the systemic racism and systems that have made it so that just to offer a breakfast to children, right? Just to stand proud and say, we will not be moved, or we will start to have our poetics be the power, right? So this is the history of this Bay Area, and it's really powerful for the world. And so it's been an honor as an artist to get to, like, you know, speak, you know, today, and also to really think about the way that an Afrofuturist history would be a group practice and include Black practitioners being foregrounded, but also people like yourself, Rhonda, who actually have been deep listening and helping to stitch together what I hope will become like a really nice volume on this, and a mode of dialogue where we don't leave the voices out and we don't fail to connect Black Panthers to you know, incredible instrumental music, hip hop, punk. Like it's part of a continuum. So that brings me back to, I guess, for me, the world building is something that's happening, acknowledging it as a flow. And as an artist, whether it's working with dancers and choreographing, working. I'm excited one day, hopefully we can do some fashion together.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you know, like
that'd be dope.
thinking about like, you know, everyday things that are kind of humble, and then out of that humble everyday, sometimes there will be this kind of bit of magic, and we've all experienced it. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
I like the answers though, I was gonna say.
Yeah, can I respond? Like, oh my gosh, you guys just lit off so many lights for me too. And I just love talking to both of you. You know, just everything you said, just about sort of what you started with, Naeem, about the speculative and the freedom that creates, you know, and Octavia talked about that a lot, you know, and that's why she, you know, wouldn't necessarily identify as an Afrofuturist, you know, but she, the way that her work, she talked a lot about how it just was boundless, and she was just, and she also lived this life of Afrofuturism in a way where she lived, you know, she famously said, you have to write yourself in. And so she, a lot of her affirmations and the materials we have in the show, yeah, are her just saying like, I'm a part of this, you know, like this is how it's going to be. And so, you know, she's been coined later as an Afrofuturist. And then the other piece about the portals, I love hearing you talk about, I could listen to you talk about portals forever, Vinta. Like it just, I don't know what, it gives me goosebumps. And it just, I feel like, you know, that was the choice when I just like came across the Ernest Bean home movie footage. It was so exciting to me because it felt like a portal like that. And it felt like it was a really exciting way to round out the story about this family who the dad was a Pullman porter, and he lived in Oakland, and he was living in a time in Oakland where there was a thriving Black middle class, and the Great Migration could be viewed as a project of Afrofuturism, you know, and the second wave brought Black families here, you know, and they developed this amazing Black space of innovation and joy. And that footage is so nice to end with around that, because the connection to technology too, and how technology was used to sort of cement race as fact. And then he kind of, you know, that this footage just, you know, and a lot of what W.E.B. Du Bois was doing was like flipping it on its head and using that technology to sort of affirm, you know, Black self-determination. And then just this idea of the cycle of time too, you know, something we discovered, Essence and I, after the show was together, was how the Black news segment actually changes. It's sort of on a rotate. It has like new footage every few months. So it's just like always regenerating. And Salem Baleki's piece in the corner changes and has like its own sort of feeling around time and the circular experience of time. And then Nicole Mitchell's sound piece, we collaborated with Dolby to create that surround sound experience. And she started with, I think, like 35 sonic events, and then they randomly integrate, so they're always different. So those 3 spaces, you know, that sort of trilogy in the show creates this, like, you're always having a different experience in time, but, you know, like all the pieces are connected in this way. So just hearing you guys talk about it just really makes me really excited.
You know, it's, you're saying that again, we're just kind of talking, saying that, you know, again, it points to how, like, again, people of color, Black people and other people of color use technology in ways that are really unexpected, right? And kind of linking and starting to, because I think sometimes Afrofuturism starts to almost highlight that, bring that in relief, like how we use technology in ways that are really unexpected, right? And that's becomes important because, again, like what we choose to make, right, with the technology, or how we kind of are approaching it, you know, becomes really important. So I think that, yeah, like that idea of us engaging it in all these really very kind of distinct kinds of ways. I mean, I was thinking about when you were talking about world building and how you start to kind of make these speculative leaps, and I thought about auto-tune, you know, and again, thinking about, like, again, engaging technology in how unexpected ways, because I think the auto-tune technology was actually meant to find like oil. It's like a weird sonic wave or something like that, but that's what it was kind of meant for. But now we use it to be the most amazing, dopest rapper, like, you know, Future or Young Thug, or these idea that, like, manipulating the sound of the voice, but that seems like that also relates to like oral culture, right? The oral tradition idea of storytelling. And how do you not only through hyperbole, but also to like through sound manipulation to enhance the experience,
Yes.
right? The person who's visualizing the story.
Exactly.
And so again, it's like this, these, I'm intrigued, those are the things that are the inspiration or the springboards that are totally intrigue me about, again, like how we use technology in these really unexpected ways, you know, young brothers in Ghana, like making, you know, it's like 12 creates his own like robotic, you know, it's its own robot out of discarded materials. Again, unexpected, you know, but using his own imagination to be the catalyst to figure out like what kind of technology he wants to make, what it's going to do, you know. And I'm kind of curious with those, again, those speculative beliefs of, well, when we make robots, well, what do they do? Because again, the function seems like it has to be different than from the Western canon or idea, because technology is culturally specific. You know, there's a way that it very much is. And so again, I kind of make these like these curious about like what do we make when we start to build things or take over spaces, right? Invest in kind of architecture or city planning, and how could you reaffirm culture through those kind of ways, like through the architecture or how people move through a space.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And I think that what you're both saying makes me think about language. So it's like whether the language is like literally someone just going like this, and it shows, you know, this kind of, you're building a world for yourself, you're building a world for everyone else. And I think that that's one of the reasons possibly why hip hop and, you know, funk music before it were so universal. You could be in Hong Kong, you could be in Oakland, you could be in Detroit, and someone's doing these moves, and it's like, I understand that this is about opening another dimension. And so I love the legibility of these, the movements as a language, the visuals as a language, and then even the words themselves. So the way that words that we use can help to open space. So whether you're using a diasporic language literally, or if your diaspora comes through the way you say portal, right? The way you get connected to, you know, something you've imported into culture. And I think this is something which is also common not only in West African American culture, but also with the Native American culture, people taking patterns that, you know, did not come from the culture, but then being like, I'm going to respond. And so that innovation, the constant innovation. And I feel like looking at show here, it's like there's constant innovation of, you know, there's like disco and hip hop and funk, and there's like old legends, you know, like even Renaissance legends, but they're all sampled at an equal or without any kind of rule that you can't, it's not about blocking the possibilities. There's some kind of invitation to a more open system.
Well, totally. It's funny you say it's like a DJ Spooky, right? Remixing, you know, so again, like using kind of history, like remixing it. So again, the history of art, the history of kind of African art or diaspora, and figuring out ways to kind of reform it. Again, like poetry, things that we're sometimes familiar with, but really kind of stacking them in ways that are unfamiliar to create the new thing. Right. So again, but I like it being related to the idea of kind of the sonic kind of history of like music and hip hop, because again, it is very much like remixing, you know, like using samples, and looking at it that way, like looking at time, art history and everything as, again, like not being cyclical like that, as opposed to being linear. So I could actually pull from wherever I need to, like when I want to talk about stuff, as opposed to like, you know, shooting forward and leaving so many things kind of behind and not even like looking back. You know, and that seems like very much kind of an African kind of idea. So I feel like it's why it's one of those tropes that kind of keeps coming back in Afrofuturism, of like kind of looking at time like that. Like it's kind of a loop.
A loop. You know? The loop. Yeah, I think the loop and the sampling is so powerful. And that's
straight up right.
Right, the loop and the sampling. But I also think about just the ways that we might even take this technology and this approach to Afrofuturism, which is so prevalent and so inspiring to people, that it actually is almost part of our oxygen. It's part of like how we live and what it means to be contemporary. And so I think this show as a history, the Afrofuture show, and then your exhibition here and the upcoming works that a number of us are having, is we're trying to like describe different points of a constellation. And it's really, you know, it's as important to talk about the Pullman porters and not only African-American men, but African-American women who used to, work on the steamboats and would travel that way. So what does Black travel have to do with this? And how does, being able to have Maya Angelou be the first Black woman to, run a streetcar here in San Francisco, we just had one go by. And, but like the idea of like, making with your everyday world, it's not just about the spaceships, even though the spaceship is like an incredible metaphor that we can all use, lift off, transcendence, step through the portal, be in the desert, be in the woods, be in the city. And they're all places where you could take off or have like a pyramid moment. I'm thinking of these beautiful hieroglyphics behind me that are put forward here out of your language. And it's like that fist, it's like everything becomes potential, magic and poetry, but at the same time, it's also about serious policy, right? Yeah. So the fact that there is a dialogue about possibility.
Mm-hmm.
No, totally. Because I think that's it. I think when I heard about Afrofuturism and its early threads, it was like W. Du Bois's this idea of having an all-Black council, like a conference, right? So there becomes like this Pan-African council to think about what are the issues that are looming for all people of the diaspora across the globe. Because again, making this future leap of like, this could be good because we are all scattered. So if there was kind of a UN type body, but it was of all Africans, we have somebody to kind of look out for us because we're a group of people, right, have never had protection. Like, what is security? Nothing. We've never had a sense of security, right? So that was a pretty amazing leap. And again, that's grounded in reality, but the catalyst was this dream. Right. So because that's how I see a lot of it sometimes functioning is again, not necessarily the mutants, but the idea of dreaming or giving yourself the space to have not just kind of survival mode, like thoughts, but this moment of having like, that'd be kind of dope if we could all get together and have security like that. What would that even look like? I don't even know. But having, but kind of pausing, right, from the everyday, like, I gotta get this check. I gotta go get this grind. But creating a space for like, it's okay to meditate for a minute and dream of like what those possibilities could be, because that's what kind of the pause, that respite kind of creates, but those respites are also found in reality, grounded in reality. When you're thinking about, like you were talking about the dancers you're working with, it's like I found like those brothers are doing that, right? They're kind of creating their bodies almost into architecture. And I talked about this before, I'm like urban vernacular architecture. It's like they kind of are like shaping their bodies due to the outside pressures. What's happening here, right? And while doing that though, right, they're holding these forms. Okay, like this is a new way body could form, a new way of kind of being. But I was really feeling like this again, like they're becoming architecture, really. It's like kind of urban architecture.
I love what you're saying.
I'm sorry. I was just add just one piece, just that two things. One was George Clinton talking about, Black men in the White House, and that was like that leap that you were talking about, the speculative leap that he was making in the 70s. But in terms of dance, I'm developing a program where I'm inviting a turf dancer to activate Mothership, and then we're going to record it. And just hearing you talk about that, Binta, it's really exciting to me, like hitting those edges and responding in a way in this physical vernacular is I mean, even, and just back to the conversation about technology, in the show, that was part of the idea about putting the quilt at the end as well, because thinking about different technologies that are drawing from African traditions, but are literally creating sustenance and just like home and experience in that way, and just the different ways to look at technology and the, like when you said for hip hop, like using the unexpected, like the turntable, like making the turntable an instrument, that was like innovative way of thinking about a new technology. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, Binta, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I really do think of, the body of work that I've been most interested in, besides working with actual spaces, like these vacant lots, creating more lush spaces, more urban courtyards. The other part is the body as the architecture, right? And so whether it's turf dancers, whether it's singers that are, using their voice to create a libation literally in space, or if it's
dope.
right.
That's dope. No, that's
you know,
what
like
it
just
is.
changing the energy of the room. And these are things that we say, you know, in a very kind of, we're just used to that. We're used to having soul and funk and rock and hip hop music. But I'm very interested in auto-tune as well, because I think with auto-tune, you really are, you know, it can become a trope in pop music, but then there is something powerful about the idea of the transmission, right? That the transmission could be both abstract, almost like water that is, you know, being hit with other water, and like the sun's hitting it at the same time. So there's an event that's happening, which is beyond the note, and the note kind of has like this kind of fizz or mist or crackle in it, and that duality, right?
I think, no, I like that, because it's I also think of it's almost like because I always joke about it's like brothers like swallowing a computer. You know, it's like a bunch of young rappers swallow computers, and so it gives them this auto tune. But I think it's because it's relating to technology, right? Like their voices kind of imitating, like even some article about like other artists like Young Thug, who use their voice like imitating computer sounds, like yee, like, you know, little pops and tweaks. So it's interesting because it is relating to kind of contemporary like landscape of sound and technology, but it also seems like it's relating directly to like James Brown, you know, where he's using the voice completely like an instrument. Like he's trying to imitate the dudes in the band. Right?
He's changing space.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love
so it's so auto-tune and like those tweaks and those yelps that we have here of like the new MCs and the new style is that exact thing, making and opening these notes. You know, it's really funny. I wrote some notes about when you were giving a presentation, I think Hank Thomas's work, and you were talking about how you were pausing and doing the phrasing that related to kind of Afrofuturism. And it made me think of a really beautiful thing someone described in capoeira, like we used to bend and bow, right, to kind of play music while we do capoeira. And the pauses in between the notes, some players call the God note. So the space, the pause. So even though there's no real note being sung, so it's almost again, so this kind of African idea of recognizing open space as a place where things kind of could be built sonically, or again, or like we're talking about kind of conceptually, you know. I thought it was really funny when you brought up Sun Ra, because again, I felt like even the idea of his song, Space is the Place of the movie.
Space is the place.
It really is, you know, it seems like it's really a metaphor. It's really a metaphor for open space where you could kind of construct new ideas about Blackness.
Yeah, and his even his orchestra was titled the Orchestra, so it was almost like the arc was like transporting the people. So the music was literally designed to transport you.
Well, to create that space, right? That space where you could be whatever you could be, you want to be, without the yoke of here on terra firma, which was all the archetypes and the stereotypes, right? You needed to kind of create a clear space, you know what I mean? Because I feel like that's what I'm intrigued by when you talk about like the architecture and repurposing spaces, and also even the body as architecture, because the way, almost again, thinking about like how Black folks move, normal ways, odd ways, you know, it's like I see these really great videos of like these hip hop dancers surprising people on the street, where they're like, do a hip hop move and the person like because they think they're falling.
Yeah, they're changing time as well.
Exactly. So it totally, so it's like we interact with this stuff already, almost intuitively, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I think about again like things like candomblé, African religious practices, where you're always kind of disguising things. So there's always a dual way that we see things. So it's like
push and pull.
So yeah, the hip hop dancer is aware that their body movement in motion, but also architecture, or there's play that's there, right? How they're taking up space.
Yes. Yeah, I love the discussion about all of these modes and practices, because by speaking about them, we acknowledge them, and they become rearranged in our sense of time and space, and they become acknowledged as language, and you know.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm really excited also about sometimes the plainness that this Afrofuturism can take place in. So the plainness could be deceptively plain. So I'm thinking of someone like Alice Coltrane. I've been responding to her work, you know, with looking at like a lot of times where she'll do these kind of beautiful scales where the notes cascade up and down, like a waterfall effect. And I started looking into that more, and you know, you can find it in the Renaissance, you can find it in Indian music, you can find it in West African music, all over the place. But this idea that when you create music that goes up and down in that way, you're basically creating like a shimmering moment that people can reorder their senses, you know? So sometimes it could be somebody who maybe they don't have the shiny thing on, but the shine is in the music, right? Oh, right.
Yeah, no, that's
you know,
true.
and so I feel
That's
like there's this
interesting, yeah.
interesting like everydayness, but then
Yeah.
also
She,
formativeness, right? It's like,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Nicole Mitchell, Nicole Mitchell for the soundscape at the beginning, she, you know, the idea was to sort of create that kind of a portal. And she took, you know, these sonic moments that she designed, like one is like of her husband's voice saying all aboard, you know, and then another one is of, you know, some like bird singing or droplets, you know, and then the fact that they keep changing create this other sonic, like it literally moves you inside of you, you know, and yeah, I think that's so beautiful to hear you talk about it. And Alice Coltrane, you know, the way she draws from, you know, Detroit gospel, Detroit soul and like Baptist gospel and Hindu spirituality, she creates this unique sound, this combination of sounds that are, yeah, like sort of otherworldly, like Naeem's pictures where you're like drawing from all this different vernacular, these languages, and creating this whole other universe.
So funny when you say that, it totally makes you think of like, you know, when I lived on 20 off of MLK in Oakland and 25th Street, there was a brother that would ride his bike around and he had, and a lot of neighborhoods have this, a dude that'll have like his radio on it.
oh yeah,
and he'll be bumped
he's
his beats.
performer for the, he's helping out.
Totally,
He's helping
straight
out,
up.
yes,
So,
totally.
but that's again, we're talking about these sounds that,
Yes.
that shift you, and thinking about like how we change spaces. And so I always think about, because again, this guy would roll by at the most illest moments, you know, you could be having a terrible day.
Yes.
And this guy is playing like
Yes.
James Brown,
No,
or it could be too short, could
Yeah.
be too open, so you might
It's
hit
all
some too
open,
short.
it's open.
Right,
Yes.
but and he doesn't even care about your reaction.
No.
He just is on his roll through his route, through the neighborhood.
He's doing
And-
the work. He's
and, you
doing
know,
the
and,
work.
it's, and doing his work,
He's
which
doing it.
straight up
No, it
is
is-
the uplift,
yes,
right? Right, because you
yes.
need to hear the
I wanna
drums, the
acknowledge
rhythms,
that.
or something, right?
Yes, trying to get it together.
So and it works because I'm in my zone, and all of a sudden I hear it, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, all of a sudden,
Yes.
and we're talking about, right, like dancers as modern
Yes.
architecture, like living architecture. All of a sudden, I'm like, I'm going to become a sculpture for a second. I'm going to now move and
Yes.
flex because, man, that music sounds good.
And then people acknowledge you.
Exactly.
Even from
Right.
across
You're
the
like, hey, what's
street,
up? You know, like, I see you.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So there becomes, it's interesting, right? So this weird moment of play has happened, but all the catalyst is this moment, right? This audio moment where this comes in. And again, like Alice Coltrane's work, it's like, again, trying to tap on these audio things that you're going to respond to. And somehow, I guess, like, the neighborhood dude knows what you like in the neighborhood, but somehow, right? It just somehow is tuned to the right frequency.
It's just certain the notes. I think that what's beautiful too is like when I look at Alice Coltrane and John Coltrane, there's a duality to what they're doing.
Yeah,
So
completely.
it might be a note that shifts from major to minor, right? Something that goes from sweet to depth and bitterness to light, and you know, something. So there's this constant bending of sound that they're doing, but they're doing it with different modes, different instruments. Think of someone like Nina Simone, the way she used her voice to basically become many instruments, and
Yeah.
also protest, but a protest that was beautiful and haunting, so that even people who maybe weren't at the protest would have it in their living room on a record.
Sure.
So I think this part of the plainness, the everyday transformations, and then the transformative, more visibly transformative, or audibly transformative. I think it's just interesting that this palette is available to us, and I'm very excited to get to explore this more with you, and also through the show,
Yeah, for sure.
because it's almost like when people are exposed to these works, there are more works than to be made. That's what I feel about how it connects to world building.
Yeah, like, well, it's
Yeah.
generative, right?
Yeah.
It's generative. It makes you start to really think of the possibilities.
Yeah.
Because and that's a very powerful part of it, being generative. So it's not just flat on the wall kind of work, or even like, again, the thought process or the practice. It's not just like, oh, it's just here to kind of be on the wall, but it's actually helping to be a catalyst, right, for this other possibilities,
Yes.
because that's what the charged thing is the possibilities. I mean, that's how I see it. Is
And like this becomes a work as well.
Yeah.
And we even get to put the worlds together.
No, completely. No, I agree. I agree. Because thinking about moving through space and thinking about world building in terms, because it's like my project is, I liken it to like manga, like creating all these like comic or illustrative
I want to
worlds.
see your graphic novel. That has to
Well,
happen.
no, totally. That'll be dope. That'll be dope.
Yeah,
but it's like
it's a graphic
the idea of like creating a whole push to kind of talk about a new way of seeing your culture that's had this heavy moment of trauma, right? So creating this huge kind of massive lexicon of images that say like, and they look new. They look like, man, I never seen anything like that. That looks wild. But the root of it is actually folk culture.
Yeah, people have seen it before, but maybe not recognize it to see it reflected back.
Exactly.
Right?
You know, exactly.
Reflected back.
Totally.
Yes.
And as a griot, right, they also have to bring the story forward so it fits. So you go, oh, now that's dope. That is totally different than Goldilocks and the Three Little Bears. Man, this is way doper than that.
Yeah, like when Geechee Mutu's work does that really well, you know? Yeah, like just manipulates imagery about like, you know, racial capitalism and colonialism, and like just like reconstructs it into these like sublime Black-centered visions, like just takes like anti-Black racism and is like, really? And then like makes this like beautiful expression, you know? And
Yeah.
Her show is amazing over there, man. It's another good show.
yeah, at the Legion of Honor.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, that's a whole nother like 2-hour conversation.
Yes, it's amazing.
For sure.
Yeah.
We got to get her in the conversation.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I think also having Geechee's show within the context of the park. So for me, I'm really drawn to the the landscape, the urban landscape, the mapping, and how when you create a sublime moment or acknowledge the sublime which is there, like there's another gentleman with the speakers in who goes to Frank Ogawa, and I always kind of just encourage him because he actually has like these huge speakers and he just shifts Frank Ogawa Plaza, and there's someone on Market Street who also has they all have their own practice. Basically, they're vending sound but for free. Yeah. And it should be like a position, it's like an actual,
you're right.
It's a real work, but
it's right.
But I think about remapping. And so, here we are situated on this diagonal street of Market Street, and it hits the bay, and that bay used to not even have a bridge, and then water, and then there's Oakland, right? So there's this whole connection between Black maritime culture, African-American cowboys, the blending of Black and Native American culture from New Orleans all the way through here. And just the fact that,
Well, I was going to say, we'll just add on the technology, the train routes, because they come directly from like Texas and Louisiana up here. So that's why we have most African Americans are from those areas here.
Exactly.
And that type of culture, the Black cowboys, those things, that's why we see them located here too.
Exactly. And then, but when we don't have a chance to like acknowledge those migrations and celebrate them, people still find ways to do it, but they're doing it literally on the edge of the corner because there's no like sanctioned space. And so, nearby here, I'm doing reviving an old African-American bar that has a yard in the back that hasn't been used. So the first thing we're gonna do is just make this lush space for people to just, move from that little edge of corner to like have an invitation, right? Yeah. And I feel like with the work around us, you're inviting us to also just celebrate and have a space for it to happen. What do you think?
Think about how you move through spaces, again, like especially when I start kind of playing with some of my architecture. And I think a lot of that comes from, it's funny, like that, we're talking to Candace about this, with spaces in terms of like, grew up in apartments my whole life. And so the intimacy of those types of spaces and how they're cut off, certain things are blocked at times, doors are open, so you're meant to move in or not move in. But complicated emotional dramas happen in these spaces.
Exactly.
So I think what came up in that conversation is how we activate those spaces. I think when Candace was talking about a philosopher, and so that kind of intrigued me, especially like with even thinking about your work too, in relationship to mine, because I'm thinking about using African symbols as actual architecture and how that could speculatively, like how does that help someone reaffirm their culture, like feel strong, or how do they now move differently within those spaces, like a Ashanti, symbol as a building,
let's do it.
right? Or a Dinkra symbol as like a symbol. So
I can see it.
But I think I'm intrigued by that. Like when I started kind of building some of these spaces, thinking about like how I move through those spaces. And also thinking as a culture, man, there's lots of Black folks that live in apartments, and there are witness to all these jobs, but we don't see them. We see like, Better Homes or Architectural Digest. But I like it, like even those Chinese screen paintings where you're looking at the drawings and you're looking at these cranes perspective and things that are cut off, activities that are like happening. So I think that sometimes I try to strive for some of those things when building some of the space we're thinking about them. Other ones are also like memoryscape, because the impact of how lived experiences in certain architectural spaces, and I think Candace had spoke to this, was like thinking of my grandmother's foyer in the Bronx, like the checkerboards that are within the paintings, like thinking about that, but then that also relates to the checkerboards being a symbol for leopard society, in parts of kind of North Africa. So it's those kind of memories, or how I moved through my grandma's apartment, right? Looks similar to my aunt's apartment, So again, but thinking about those mindscapes and how there's really very strong memories that are formed in these particular angles, these smaller kind of closed spaces. So think about that.
I love the way you're talking about architecture, because it's all about these thresholds. And these thresholds, these passages, and like, right. And I can already see, the apartments, and I had that duality of like, you have a small space growing up, but then for me, the park or wherever there was openness, I would be drawn to that. So that's, for some people, that becomes like their main space, is the outside the space. So acknowledging that, things like that. And I feel that's why I think the rehearsal that the Afrofuturist show is offering is like a rehearsal of a particular space that joins these different practices. And it extends necessarily beyond a museum or any one particular gallery, but it's important that we mark these moments, do you know what I mean? So that we can then, draw this kind of body of knowledge that we're talking about. And I feel it's like when you watch those, like a documentary about like 70s hip hop forming out of disco or something, and it always just like, I don't care who tells the story, it's always like mind blowing, because basically, right? It's like you go from a situation where like the garbage isn't even being picked up because of strikes and different things going on, and then suddenly there's like this magic, this luxury, but luxury made out of very simple means, just a couple records and a turntable. But now I think, again, that Afrofuturist, or even what I like to call Afro-present, like how we're working with the present, it's almost what would you say, both of you, is like a kit that you see people putting together, creating with everyday means right now? We talked about turf dancing, but any other ways that you see us being able to perform, these rituals?
Sure.
That's a great question. And I love that you're thinking about the show as an invitation. That's so exciting to me, because to me, it's just like one part of this larger conversation. Like, look at all these constellations that meet and match and connect. And I just, when you were talking about that music, I was thinking about the moment that soul turned into funk, and not turned into it, but evolved into funk, and it was taking like the sort of structure of soul in these bands that were like, had to like have this certain rhythm together and stick together and dress a certain way. And then it was just like, nope, and it just like broke it open and like took all of this sort, like, look, we want to do this. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the Summer of Soul movie, when Stevie Wonder like loses his mind on the drums. You're just like, yes, like this. It's like so exciting, because it was a political time that was like meant for that. It was like, yes, let's just like break this all apart and rethink it. And like you said, with James Brown making his voice into an instrument and saying like, no, we can do this new way, and let's take it down this new path, and it's all sort of a part of this larger conversation, and it's just so great to listen to you guys. Oh my gosh, like I'm getting goosebumps from the whole conversation. I hate to bring it to an end, I really do. Yeah, but it's been great. And thank you, Candace, so much for inviting us to like do this.
For sure. No, this has been really strong. I totally dig it, man. And I really
Thank you so.
It's been great to kind of talk to you like in person, and really, to kind of explore a lot of these topics and to talk even more with Rhonda is really great. So again, thank you, Candace, for hosting us. Is really great.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel that this is almost like a part of this invitation is that culture itself is a kind of software. That's what's coming to me from all of this. And I often think of music as a software and urban space as a software that we're constantly processing and changing. But in this case, culture as software is really something that I'd like to offer as an artist working with these practices and in the round in collaboration with you.
For sure, I like the idea, you know, because there's funny. I was thinking about a piece that's in the Mothership show where it's a Black android.
Yeah.
And so thinking about like if we're creating like Black, you know, this kind of like Black software, this would, you know, again, kind of connecting to this again, like the weird ways that as Black folks we use technology. So I like that. I think that's a great way to another weird way that we use technology.
I could listen to you three forever if we could, but we do need to wrap up. We do have a question from the audience for Naeem, and the question is, what realities do the worlds you've created in these new works in your solo show strive to offer?
You know, I'm such a big fan of folklore, like Brer Rabbit tales and others tales where animals act like humans and humans interact with animals, like across the diaspora. I really love those. So I think like the world that I kind of see is a bit of what we talked about, like interesting new types of technology that are again based on like maybe cultural specificity. That'll be kind of I'm curious what those would look like. Sonic drums, or you know, the brother who's riding around the new speculative neighborhood with the boom box on the back of his bike, but a new spaceship on. But I think of it as a place where there is more of a closeness to nature, kind of building on that, like because I felt like those stories are metaphors for that. A way to communicate with it more strongly. Even in some of the imagery, I like the idea of hybrids because I feel like then it's like this again, even this more closer idea with nature, right? High-tech masking, you know, like maybe nanotechnology used to kind of create masking, to even pick up on some of that stuff where you're saying like these kind of the hyper personalities we see in hip hop, like making these really for fun, right? Like that being an extension of like your accessories and wares. So I'm thinking and since we've kind of focused on world building, I think of a lot of like kind of these pieces, you know, in terms of like the mood of that world. I think it's a world where it's all constructed by things that we've been talking about today. We're considering things like cultural space, how we move in those spaces, city planning, you know, architectural spaces that are devoted to Black culture that help us kind of reaffirm our identity, how we move, our health. You know, these are things that I'm thinking about when I'm building kind of some of these worlds, how I see them. The justness of them, you know, again, I think we're still sorting some of those things out in terms of that. But I think that equity for sure is a big part of it in terms of having space for everybody's culture. You know, gender, there's issues around gender fluidity being something that I feel is important. You know, I guess being an educator and seeing the struggles that a lot of my young students kind of go through, but also too being aware of like there has to be kind of equity around those things. So I kind of feel again, it definitely is a just place in terms of dealing with some of those issues. Again, I'm thinking more of like very specifics, but I feel like like that's how I kind of envision it. A very, very strong, broad place for reaffirming Black culture in architecture, the way that we move within the art, the accessories, the things on our bodies. But
Well, thank you, wonderfully said. Again, this could just be the start of maybe a series of conversations that we have to explore all the myriad of topics that you brought up today. All three of you really, really rich. So I just need to thank you again. And if you haven't seen Mothership Voyage into Afrofuturism at the Open Museum, California, please go and do so. It'll be open till February. And Vinta's exhibitions, Black Space and Black Monuments, please go check that out. And of course, Nyame Brown's solo exhibition, The Lore of Blackness at 1632 Market Street. Come by Wednesday through Sunday. It'll be up until the end of September. So thank you again, Rhonda, Binta, and Nyame for your just sharing your wisdom and your poetry today. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Binta. Thank you, Candace. Thank you, Rhonda. That was awesome.
Okay, all right.